Hey there, welcome back to the Danielle D'Onofrio Daily Podcast. Today we're going to wrap up a little series that we have been doing on codependency. Now, the series wasn't intentional. I'd say this is like the last 3 or so videos, maybe 4 that I've done here on the channel have revolved around codependency or associated themes. And I want to wrap it up today because we're going to talk about things beyond just codependency, right? But to wrap things up, I really want to address something that I'm thinking about, and it's just how significant a role codependency plays in our struggles before the journey begins. You know, I was just doing some work on my book, which you can access the first few chapters over on Substack in the description below. There's a direct link to get over there. Some of the later chapters of my book, I'm talking about the traits, the adult-child traits, sort of the laundry list you may have heard. And it's sort of just a laundry list of things that we as adult children struggle with in adulthood before we go on the journey. And so many of the traits link back to codependency. And it got me thinking that really what happens when we grow up in dysfunctional circumstances is we essentially just lose ourselves. We lose ourselves. All right? We lose trust in ourselves. We start to lose our self-worth. We start to look everywhere aside from ourselves to define who we are, because it's too scary to be vulnerable. And really the authentic self, when we exist in our authenticity, that's when we're most vulnerable, right? Because that means that someone can actually see us, right? It means that they can better understand who we are and what we like and what we're interested in and what we're, how we interact, what our real personality is, right? When we show our true selves to the world, we become vulnerable. And so, when you come up in dysfunctional circumstances, from very early on, we detect the fact that we're not necessarily emotionally, mentally, and sometimes physically safe, right? So we start to layer on those defense mechanisms and the survival tactics to hide the authentic self, to keep it safe. But as we layer on those tactics and mechanisms, which serve their purpose in childhood, as we layer them on, we lose more and more touch with our authenticity. And that is essentially losing touch with ourselves. We lose ourselves in that process. And essentially, that's how codependency is born, because we have to have some grasp on who we are, right? We have to have some, and I don't mean who we are, we have to anchor to earth in some way. So we have to give ourselves some sort of identity, even if we are so deeply detached from our authenticity. We need some identity. We have to figure out how we're moving through this world, how we're relating with other people, how we're making decisions, right? We need some sort of identity. And so we build one based on those survival and defense mechanisms. We build one, and that identity that we build is a codependent one. So, we all come up with different circumstances, right? And that the severity of those circumstances is going to, span a wide spectrum, right? But, what happens is that identity that we form out of survival leads us to some degree of codependency. And now that codependency, along with that codependency, we see all of the other traits and all of the other common wounds that arise from childhood dysfunction, right? Fear of abandonment, the rescuer tendencies, the low self-worth. There's a whole laundry list, but all of those relate back to codependency. All of them are, I am detached from my authentic self. I don't really know who I am. I maybe never knew who I was because the survival tactics started so early on. Or, you're detached from who you are, and you're really just trying to figure out what your identity is, to keeping you anchored to the world, keeping you anchored to earth. And that identity is a codependent one, where we are looking We are just trying to survive, and we are looking to everything outside of us to help us define who we are, right? And that, the rescuer, I just mentioned the rescuer tendency, right? So we are constantly looking to fix people's situations and to fix people and to rescue people, right? Because we think that that's where our worth comes from, right? And it's just, I think so many of these, the fear of abandonment, right? If you are secure in who you are and you are fully grounded in the fact that you are an individual, independent, free agency person, person who has the, like the agency to create their life and to make decisions that are best for them. If you have that, that fear of abandonment goes away, because we fear being abandoned because we fear not being taken care of, right? Or being alone. But when you are comfortable with yourself and you're connected to your authenticity, being alone is actually okay. It doesn't scare you as much, right? So really, the reason why codependency comes up so much for us when we are healing from childhood trauma or dysfunctional upbringing, the reason it comes up so much is because that's sort of our state of being, and it manifests in a number of different ways. But the fact that we've essentially lost ourselves and we're looking all around us to try to form some sort of identity, that's just sort of the state of being that we're in, and we need to eventually shed that identity. And, in my methodology, again, you can learn about my methodology in my book over on Substack, but in my methodology, I take you through a system that helps you reconnect with the authentic self. It's a rehabilitation, because we need to drop the survival identity, because your identity is essentially made up of your beliefs, right? And your survival beliefs are making up your current identity. Those are beliefs that I need to be something for other people. I need to do things in order to be worthy, or I'm not allowed to set boundaries because if people are mad at me, something's bad is going to happen to me. Like, we have to drop all those false beliefs, all the survival beliefs, which form our current identity. And we need to rehabilitate the authentic self, which means re-expose it and rebuild our life based on the true beliefs about ourselves and about actual reality, right? Not about this sort of imaginary world that we had to create in order to survive. And so that's really what it's all about. It's about, and I think this is sort of a new perspective crystallizing for me right now, that codependency really does weave a much stronger thread through that experience and through the healing journey. And really, it's sort of maybe even the most important overarching theme in this type of life experience, that we've, like I've said a couple of times now, we've lost ourselves in the process, maybe even never connected with our authentic self. If your circumstances started very, very early, maybe you were born into them, or maybe they started very, very early in childhood. We've never been in touch with ourselves, or we've lost touch with ourselves. And now we have to go on a journey to reconnect with that authenticity. And that is an identity shift. And the identity shift is essentially a replacement of all of our faulty beliefs that we acquired in dysfunctional circumstances, from dysfunctional or toxic people or events, or, just entire life experiences, right? We need to be able to peel back those layers, learn about how the world really works when we're in healthy, functional, non-toxic environments, right? Reconnect with ourselves so that we can design our life from our authentic alignment. And so I'm going to be thinking a little bit more about that. It's not a departure from the way I've seen things, but it's just sort of everything sort of crystallizing into this major, major theme that I think that if we can anchor ourselves on the journey that way, understanding that all of it, all of the little symptoms and all of the wounds and all of the struggle and all of the suffering, at the end of the day, it all comes from the separation between us, between how we're experiencing life right now and how our authentic selves would be experiencing life. And we have to learn through the healing journey how to close that gap so that we can be back in alignment. And that's when the suffering ends, right? The suffering is only there because we are separated from who we really are. And that's really what it's all about. And we talk about codependency. I think people put codependency in too much of a box. Like it's just one symptom of, dysfunctional circumstances in childhood, right? Childhood trauma. We come up and codependency is one of those things. But at the end of the day, codependency is when we rely on everything around us. And really, all right, I'm literally thinking this out in real time with you guys right now. Really, I think everything kind of roots into codependency and then stems from codependency. So if we can bring our focus to figuring out how to heal that codependency, which I mentioned in a previous video. Again, this has been sort of like a series because codependency has just been on my mind this week. But if we can focus on codependency as the major theme, and I meant, like I was just about to say, I talked about boundaries being a very powerful antidote to codependency. And not just like boundaries heal codependency. So you have to understand, like, learning what boundaries are, learning, how to be, look within yourself to figure out what you need and what you desire, and what peace and happiness look like to you. Learning how to define boundaries that you need, learning how to express those boundaries, learning how to stand up for yourself and maintain those boundaries. Like the whole practice, the whole experience of bringing boundaries into your life will dissolve codependency. Like you don't have to focus on, and actually you never really want to focus on a symptom. This is the same thing that you hear about in the healthcare industry, right? Like there's a whole new movement saying like we need to be getting to the root cause. Like the symptoms, you can spot treat symptoms, but that's never getting rid of the root cause. And when it comes to trauma healing and childhood trauma healing, it's almost impossible to spot treat a symptom because these are like trauma responses that show up like in a split second before you even have a chance to notice that they're going to show up. Like we fall back into these relationship habits. We have these incredibly strong emotional reactions that just hit us like a wave, right? It's impossible to just say, I'm not going to do that anymore, or I'm going to work on not doing that anymore, because you don't know when so you can start to identify your triggers along the way, but even if you know your triggers, they're still going to trigger you, right? You got to get really down deep to the root of why you're being triggered, right? And usually what it comes down to is you don't feel like you're allowed to be in control of your life. You don't feel like you're allowed to set boundaries. You don't feel like you're allowed to do what you want to do, right? And it's not just not being allowed, but you're actually afraid to do those things because you're afraid of other people's reactions, right? You're afraid of being abandoned for doing what you need, or for doing something that's not directly connected to what someone else needs. And that's all codependency. That's all us depending on external things, people, circumstances to define who we are, right? So, oh man, it's really striking me today, the sort of massive nature of this codependency theme. And again, it doesn't depart from anything that I have in the book already. It really just ties everything together even stronger, and I love that. And I'm sharing this with you in real time, so if I'm a little bit disjointed in this podcast, it's because I turn on the camera every day to talk to you guys, and I'm just riffing on what is showing up for me in my journey, what's showing up for me in my thought processes, stories from my life. This particular daily podcast is not pre-planned. I'm just, getting out into the world my thoughts and insights. So codependency, I think we're going to wrap up that theme just for, the next couple of days. We're going to talk about a couple of other things. Lots of other things, because I'm releasing this podcast every day for the next, 300 some odd days, every day in 2025. So this is our 15th episode. Thank you so much for watching and for subscribing. Hopefully you are subscribed. If you're not, you can hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get alerted when I release these every evening. And if this video was helpful or interesting, or if you have any questions, definitely hit that thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. And as I mentioned, my book is becoming more and more available over on Substack for a very small monthly fee. It's a subscription fee that you can cancel anytime, but I'm getting about one chapter up a day right now, and there's plenty to read over there right now. And yeah, you can just head over there and start reading and join the community discussion. Okay, so I think that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for joining, and I will catch you in tomorrow's video. Take care.